because whoever comes early, they'll have to wait for long otherwise. Huh? Hmm?
Okay.
Okay. Huh? Okay. We'll start the first. Today I'll be discussing on pulmonary embolism. Which of the following drugs is used for treatment of cancer associated thromboembolism? So the choices are so what are the choices? Low molecular weight heparin, antithrombin 3 inhibitors, direct factor 10A inhibitors, and warfarin. What do you think is a choice answer? Huh?
Sir.
Hmm.
Mm,
Tell Roshan. Huh? So we are dealing with a patient who is suffering from cancer, and we want to prevent thromboembolism in him. So, thromboembolism means what? The commonest for thromboembolism is DVT.
the
Huh?
deep vein. Yes, sir.
Deep vein thrombosis is the embolism. And embolism which we are concerned is pulmonary basically. Huh? Pulmonary embolism is the concern here. So, if you want to prevent this, which are the drug you want to prescribe in a patient uh, suffering from cancer? So, how do you prevent thromboembolism? Have you read? Roshan?
Sir, mainly, sir, low molecular weight heparin.
Yeah. Then there is one drug. Can you use antithrombin 3 inhibitors, direct factor 8 inhibitors, warfarin? You can definitely use all of them. Huh? The preferred one is this. Okay.
Yes,
Hmm?
sir.
And more so in a patient who is suffering from cancer, this is the prescribed drug. Hmm?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. We'll go to the this one, thromboembolism proper chapter. Hmm? What you know what is varicose triad?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
Sir, whenever endothelial injury is there,
Yeah,
with
vessel injury. Hmm.
circulation and coagulation factor is more present, it is called, sir, Picroster.
Yeah, varicose triad. Vessel injury or endothelial injury. Then it is actually not single thing. A patient who has all the three is
Yes,
more
sir.
prone to
It's
develop
a triad.
thromboembolism. That's what it says. Deep vein thrombosis otherwise. Huh?
Sir.
See, these three patients are prone for thrombus formation. Venous basically, that is deep vein thrombosis. Or so what are those? Stasis means a patient who is bedridden. Huh?
Yes, sir.
Huh?
Immobilized.
Yeah, immobilized. A patient who is more obese. Sedentary lifestyle. All these things are the components of stasis. And a patient who has vessel injury. Vessel injury is usually inflammatory diseases like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, this and that. They can cause vessel injury. And hypercoagulability. Again, obesity comes here. Then increasing age basically. Huh? Increasing age. I
Yes, sir.
got a chart on that. I'll show you. Huh? So the stasis causes are whenever there is stasis, a patient who is surgery, especially orthopedic, huh? Orthopedic surgery patients, and who have sustained trauma, immobility, paralysis, hemiparesis, huh? Basically paralysis, all these are the causes of stasis. Then increasing age. Also, the patient who is more aged is more likely to have stasis because less mobile. And pregnancy and postpartum, these two phases also there is a immobility a bit.
Yes, sir.
And heart failure and respiratory failure patients, because they have dyspnea and all that, they also have a immobility. So stasis and obesity. More obese persons are usually don't move around much. So these are the causes of stasis. Hmm? This is the first one part of the varicose triad. Then vessel injury, where all you can get vessel injury. Previous deep vein thrombosis. See, these are the veins, na? Inside the veins, there are valves here. Huh? So blood which comes from periphery towards the heart, it should not fall back. These valves will be there. That's how the veins are protected. A patient who develops a deep vein thrombosis once, huh? These vessels, venous vessels, they get partially damaged. Sometimes it is called as post thrombotic syndrome. Huh?
Yes, sir.
These patients, so later on, they are the more recurrent chance of formation of again DVT. Once a patient gets a DVT due to some cause, so the damaged vessel becomes a uh, nidus for developing once more DVT. That's what. Smoking also causes vessel injury. Hmm? Varicose veins. You know what is varicose veins? Huh?
Yes, sir.
Usually it is superficial veins. You will get into this. They also can cause more pressure on the deep veins also like that. These are also then central venous catheter. So what are central venous catheters? We put through subclavian jugular. You have seen central vein
Yes, sir. Yes.
catheter. Huh?
Yes, sir.
You have seen that is through the subclavian vein, hmm? Subclavian vein, internal jugular vein, sometimes femoral vein. These are the central veins. The more deep there, they connect directly to vena cavas, either superior or inferior vena cavas. So these catheterization, we put tubes inside that to deliver drugs, and to monitor intravascular volume and to put some instruments, especially during cardiology, we put pacemakers and all that here through central vein. Sometimes some procedures like PTMC, percutaneous transmitted commissurotomy, they're all done through central vein. So these are all
Yes.
things, when it is done, they are prone to develop injury to the vessel there. Okay, they can end up with one other triad of varicose. Then hypercoagulability state. What are the hypercoagulability states? So increasing age itself is hypercoagulable state. Malignancy and cancer therapy both. Hypercoagulability, estrogen therapy. Remember this, sometimes they give progesterone therapy here. Any choice. So we have to filter it out. Estrogen therapy is associated with hypercoagulable
Hypercoagulation.
state. Acute medical illness. Inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative Crohn's disease. And never forget this nephrotic syndrome. It is a hypercoagulable state. Huh?
Okay, sir.
Somebody has come. Okay. So it is a nephrotic syndrome is a hypercoagulable state. Hmm? Okay. So then we got this PNH. It's also called as paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. It is also there are some inherited diseases like what factor 5 Leiden factor deficiency, protein C deficiency, protein S deficiency, antithrombin 3 deficiency. These are all inherited diseases which can cause thrombus. And then one more important thing is antiphospholipid
Lipid syndrome.
antiphospholipid antibody. These are also patients with the hypercoagulable state. And thrombophilia. That thrombophilia means increase in platelet count. These are all cases of hypercoagulable status. All these three are nidus or a varicose triad will come inside this. Okay, these three: stasis, vessel injury, and hypercoagulability.
Yes.
Hmm? There can be questions on that. Maybe if not here. Hmm? Okay then. Now we'll come to pathophysiology of this DVT. This is pulmonary embolism. Sorry, pathophysiology of pulmonary embolism. So in fact, I'll be discussing partly DVT and partly pulmonary embolism because a DVT is a one which causes pulmonary embolism.
Causes
Right?
pulmonary embolism.
Yeah, somewhat little bit discussion is on the both topics here. Even
Yes.
Harrison covers in a single chapter. In New Harrison, it is a chapter number 273, I believe. Just check that and read that. These are all important topics which you should not forget to. You have to read that. Okay. Oh, now the what is the pathophysiology? The basic pathophysiology of pulmonary embolism is arterial hypoxia. That means the PO2 will get reduced. Huh?
Yes,
That's
sir.
the first thing. That's the first thing. Huh? This leads to dyspnea. Huh? Dyspnea. This leads to dyspnea. Then what is this? Increase alveolar arterial O2. Where you get this? In which type of diseases? Obstructive or restrictive? Increase you get in restrictive. Obstructive you
Rest.
don't get the difference. Huh? Because there is this a parenchymal disease, this gradient is going to increase. Huh? You have to know this. Alveolar arterial O2 tension gradient is increased in patients of pulmonary embolism, ARDS, huh? Huh? All these things. Even pulmonary edema due to any cause, it increases. But whereas in COPD, huh? Asthma, yeah, these are all obstructive lung diseases. This gradient is not much increased. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Then increase in dead space. The dead space, because here a dead space. See the what happens is this alveoli, the air is coming and going. Huh? Air is coming and going here. Air comes here, whereas the artery, which is the one which comes and uh, collects the oxygen and goes back, is blocked due to pulmonary embolism. Okay,
Okay, sir.
so it's actually a dead space now. Hmm? Dead space. There is a dead space, physiological dead space. Physiological dead space also will get increased here. This can all, even anatomical and physiologic dead space, get
Same.
increased in pulmonary embolism. This can be MCQ. That's why I put those points here. And increase pulmonary vascular resistance. This is because when the pulmonary arteries are blocked, there is a reflux vasoconstriction. Hmm? So reflex vasoconstriction of the pulmonary vasculature, that would increase pulmonary vascular resistance. These are all things. Then alveolar hyperventilation. Yeah, you can expect it. Dead ventilation, but it is useless ventilation. There is a hyperventilation. So what type of respiratory failure you expect here? Type 1 or
Type,
type 2? Which one you expect?
type 1, sir.
Very good. You expect a type 1 respiratory failure here, because there is a
Hypoxia.
hyperventilation, but no oxygenation. But carbon dioxide will get washed out. Hmm? Increase airway resistance due to constriction of airways distal to the bronchi. See, whatever the bronchi which are not getting perfused now, the body, the lungs will cause spasm of those bronchioles or bronchi. So thus the airway resistance will also go up. Arterial pulmonary vascular resistance also goes up, and airway resistance, that also goes up in a patients of pulmonary embolism. Hmm? Decrease pulmonary compliance. So pulmonary hypertension. Now see, as a consequence of all this, there's a pulmonary arterial hypertension. It is. Remember that it is pulmonary arterial hypertension. So right ventricle, due to pulmonary arterial hypertension, what do you expect? Huh? Car pulmonary, or right ventricular dysfunction. And there can be right ventricular microinfarction. Hmm? Hmm? So there,
Okay.
why there you get a right ventricular microinfarction? There is a overstretching of the right ventricle due to the pressure effects. So there can be infarction of right ventricle. What is infarction? Means necrosis of the muscle. That is the infarction there.
Yes.
You're getting me?
Yes, sir.
Okay then. These are the few silent features of pulmonary embolism. Silent features. What I forgot to tell here. Okay. Now, then I should have told you about in pulmonary embolism. Pulmonary embolism can be acute and chronic. Acute is a acute event. Chronic means chronic. It will be multiple times. See, there are small episodes of small thrombi going and getting put into the pulmonary circulation, thus leading to on chronic basis what will cause pulmonary arterial hypertension, leading to what? Carpulmonary. That also can cause. Okay, so is also called as CTE, chronic thromboembolic PH, pulmonary hypertension. Chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. Okay, you getting me?
Yes, sir.
So this is the entity. This is there. So this is a chronic, multiple episodes of pulmonary embolism, or small pulmonary embolism, leading to persistent pulmonary arterial hypertension, leading to complications of right heart failure and all that. Okay. That is the entity is there. You should know that. So a patient who of a massive pulmonary embolism, I am talking about acute now. Unless mentioned, I'll be talking about acute pulmonary embolism only, if I don't mention that. So acute massive pulmonary embolism, these patients, they present with this important finding. Remember this, syncope. Anyway, dyspnea is always there in pulmonary embolism. This is always there. And syncope, that is, and hypotension. A patient will come with syncope and hypotension. Anyway, dyspnea and cyanosis is due to hypoxia. These features will be there in a massive pulmonary embolism. Okay. And
Yes,
submassive,
sir.
less than that. See, these massive pulmonary embolism patients are 5 to 10%. Right? So the of the 100 patients, 5 to 10% of the pulmonary embolism are due to massive. So 20 to 25% are submassive. Submassive. And here, these patients, they present with RV dysfunction, but there is usually no hypotension. Okay. If there is a cardiogenic shock or hypotension, then it falls into this group. If not, it falls into, see, it is like something like that. Normal blood pressure with the RV dysfunction alone, it is submassive or a moderate. Something like that. So RVD, left atrial dysfunction with hypotension is a massive. Okay, you're
Yes,
getting
sir.
this? Huh? Massive means, there will be atrial dysfunction plus hypotension.
Pulmonary hypertension.
Submassive means, there is
Normal.
just RVD but a normal blood pressure. Huh? That's what it means. So in case if the patient has got no hypertension, but if there are signs of right heart failure in the form of raised JVP, tender hepatomegaly, and all that stuff, and release of troponins, cardiac biomarkers, that is due to right ventricular infarction, microinfarction. ECG, there may not be classical signs of what you say infarction, but there could be small microinfarctions. This will raise the troponin I,
Yes, sir.
troponin, and thus these are the such patients. Although they don't have shock, these are not good patients. They may deteriorate to and become serious later. Hmm? That's one ominous sign in a patient who has got any patient of massive pulmonary embolism is ominous. It is a bad case, serious case. In submassive patient, if these things are there, then it is bad. Then also it can worsen. Chances of worsening are very high. Okay. Deep vein thrombosis. These why I'm talking so much on these things are massive, moderate, intermediate. These you should know which very serious patient has got a different line of treatment, whereas less serious patient has got a different line of management. That's the reason you should know. Okay, and now I discussed about pulmonary embolism. I'll go to deep vein thrombosis now, which is also the one which is very commonly associated with it. And most common DVT happens in cough veins. Cough.
Yes.
Where? Cough. Okay. I'm drinking water. Fine. Most of the Deep vein thrombosis happens in calf veins and they extend upwards into femoral and iliac veins. So, got it. This is something important because if the DVT is restricted to calf veins, then the treatment is different. And if it extending upwards, then treatment is also different. These things you should know why we are discussing. Because as it proceeds from calf to up, it suggests it is more serious case. Okay. And only calf veins, it is a less serious case. Huh? That is the reason plan of treatment does differ with the amount of DVT. Hmm? And there is something called as provoked and unprovoked. I'll come to that. Huh? Hmm? Okay. Upper limb DVT are less common and associated with our interventions like pacemaker. You know, I told you about the pacemaker. You people know what is pacemaker?
Yes, sir.
Huh? Why others are not speaking? Hmm? Pacemaker. Pacemaker is an instrument that is placed in the chest only, and we put it through the subclavian vein and place the lead inside the right ventricle usually. Huh? Right ventricle apex. That is a common place. There are other types of pacemakers, dual chamber, single chamber. I'll not go to that into that detail. So, and also this DVT can be a complication of central line insertions, especially in uh, dialysis patients. You have seen a dialysis patient who has not undergone AV fistula. What is AV fistula? In the forearm, they create an artificial, I mean, they create a connection between the AV fistula will be something like this. Created by the surgeon for the purpose of dialysis. So here, suppose this is a vein and this is the artery. This is artery. They create a connection like this. So that for dialysis now they can prick here. The prick a needle and start a dialysis. They'll connect to dialysis machine here. So this is done. AV fistula. So if they do an AV fistula, this AV fistula they can use for 5-6 years. This is the one technique which is done for dialysis patients. Of course, what happens is sometimes AV fistula can get blocked, or a patient has not yet got operated for AV fistula. In such a patient, they will put this is a neck. This is a neck. In the internal jugular vein, this is the internal jugular vein. They'll put a catheter here. Catheter here in the vein, and this will go up to what? Up to superior vena cava. They'll keep this catheter here only. It will be there for 15 to 5 weeks. They keep it depending upon the types. So the longer, 15 days to 5 weeks, rather they can keep there for a long time. When they keep for a long time now, there can be occlusion of this vessel and all that. This vein, central vein. So that also can cause thromboembolism later. That complication can occur. Okay, usually upper limb DVT is due to iatrogenic, doctor induced. Lower limb is usually due to what? Patient, bedridden patient. Hello?
Immobilized. Prolonged immobilized.
Yeah, immobilized patients, lower limb. Upper limb is most commonly due to iatrogenic. You should know that. Now, something about superficial venous thrombosis. I think so you have seen plenty of them. You would have put your during husbandship IV line. After a few days, you must have felt a cord-like vein there. That vein where you have inserted your Kit Kat or this one, it will become hardened. You have felt that? Palpable cord. Superficial. I'm talking about now superficial, not deep. This superficial deep vein thrombosis, you can feel it with your own hand, and there will be erythema, tenderness, and all that locally. It will locally. It will not be. It will local. So these patients are also can get complicated with DVT later. However, this is not the usual cause for what? Superficial vein thrombosis is not a usual cause of pulmonary embolism. But this superficial vein thrombosis can get complicated with the deep vein thrombosis. thus can cause pulmonary embolism. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Now, a patient low clinical likelihood deep see when you're diagnosing deep vein thrombosis, so you have to what you say, you have to see how possibility is there. Like there is a low risk. See low clinical likelihood of deep vein thrombosis (DVT). If if the score is 0, the patient who has got whether he has got DVT or not clinically. Okay, when to diagnose it? So if the chances are less, if it is low risk means it is score is 0 or less. If it is 0 means very low risk, this score. You have to add up them, and if it is between 1 to 2, it is moderate, and more than 3 is or greater is high risk. So depending upon the score, we'll have to stratify the patients for what type of treatment, prevention, or what type of treatment you want to give like that. It is for treatment, sorry, not prevention. Okay. So patient who has got an active cancer. That means if he got active cancer, he already gets one score here. See, imagine. So there, that means even although he doesn't have any signs of DVT, active cancer itself is the it comes one low risk already comes. Now likelihood 1 to then if the ulcerative paralysis is there, if it's bedridden more than just 3 days, and major surgery within last 12 weeks, you need not really remember all these things. Just looking at that, you should get a thought which are the things which can be problematic, like tenderness along the distribution of the deep veins, entire leg swelling. Yeah, see, entire leg is swollen, unilateral calf swelling, pitting edema, collateral superficial vein, non-varicose, of course. You can see the collaterals there. Alternative diagnosis not there. Alternative diagnosis you are not able to make other than DVT. Then, if it is there, it is -2. Sorry. So alternate diagnosis, if it is there, you can account this local finding like swelling and all that for alternative diagnosis. Then you'll have to -2. You have to reduce the score. So these you have to add up and see. If it comes more than 3, it forms high risk. So the one important thing is look for other diagnosis. If you get other diagnosis, go there. If there is no other diagnosis, come to DVT. Something like that it is. High clinical likelihood of pulmonary embolism. Now I'm talking about pulmonary embolism. This is all there in Harrison. These charts now I have taken it from Harrison. So high likelihood of pulmonary embolism if the patient score is more than 4. So skin and symptoms. So signs and symptoms of DVT are there. That means they get 3. So a patient who has got a DVT, you diagnosed it. DVT. Alternative diagnosis, like see again, alternative diagnosis less likely. That means this is you don't have alternative diagnosis for dyspnea. That's what it's telling you. If it is there, that is 3 again. Heart rate is more, 1.5. Immobilization more than 4 weeks, 1.5. Prior episode of DVT, a prior episode of pulmonary embolism or DVT gives 1.5. So a patient who has developed a pulmonary embolism or a DVT in the past is more likely to get one more episode. And hemoptysis, which is a sign of infarction, pulmonary infarction, gets 1 mark here. And if there is a cancer, you get 1 more mark. Okay. These are the pulmonary embolism diagnosis using the score. Okay. Now the treatment. See, in a patient of pulmonary embolism, patient with a low to moderate likelihood of DVT or pulmonary embolism should undergo initial diagnostic evaluation with the D-dimer testing alone. So what does it mean is a patient like who has got a score which is less than 4 here, or less than 3 here, then these patients should I'll come to this flow chart here. Okay, should undergo D-dimer test. It is a blood test. It is a blood test, which is a non-in blood test using ELISA technique. Huh? This D-dimer blood test should be done for them. Okay, that means a patient who has got a high risk of DVT, a high chance of being having DVT, and high chance of having pulmonary embolism should go for imaging straight. You can bypass D-dimer test. You got this? The
Yes,
gist
sir.
here is patient who is less likely, huh, of having DVT or pulmonary embolism should go for D-dimer test. Huh? More likely to have pulmonary embolism or DVT should go for imaging the straight away. You're getting here?
Yes, sir.
This is a basic idea. They can ask you, they can throw, they may give you a score, or they may can say this patient is real classical signs of pulmonary embolism. What you want to do? You want to go for a D-dimer test, or you want to go for imaging? Something like that they can throw there. Huh? So you using this logic, you have to come to conclusion. Huh? Huh?
Okay.
Now, algorithms for diagnostic imaging. See, same thing is given in pictograph here. Suspect DVT or pulmonary embolism. Assess the clinical likelihood. If you suspect DVT, then I'll come here. If the suspicion is low, see, if the suspicion is low, do D-dimer. If the suspicion is not low, then straight away go for imaging, like ultrasonography of the involved calf muscle and all that. That's what they're telling. Okay. Hmm? Here is the same similar way. Pulmonary embolism not high means that is less likely. Pulmonary embolism do D-dimer. Very high, then straight away take for imaging. That's all it is. You're getting
Okay,
it.
sir.
Same thing they have put it a algorithm. This is there in Harrison. Now pulmonary infarction. Something about pulmonary infarction. Pulmonary infarction. So pulmonary infarction means usually patient will have small pulmonary embolism. It is pulmonary infarction means, it is small pulmonary embolism. Usually massive, big pulmonary embolism does not cause infarction. You should know this. So small pulmonary embolism will cause pulmonary infarction, whereas massive, big, and all the submassive and all that will not cause pulmonary infarction. Huh?
Yes, sir.
Understood? Huh?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Now we'll talk something about D-dimer test. So D-dimer test is a ELISA, elevated both in DVT and pulmonary embolism. Note this. This actually just indicates endogenous, although often clinically ineffective thrombolysis. So this is a thrombolysis by inherently from inside the body. Wherever the thrombus forms, there is a thrombolytic mechanism. That is plasminogen. Plasminogen will lyse the clot which is there in the body. So that is the basic action of that. That will produce a side product of D-dimer. In fact, D-dimer is the fibrinogen degradation product. It is FDP. D-dimer is nothing but a fibrinogen degradation product. So basically, you are looking for, is there any active breaking of the clot inside the body indirectly? So if there is a breaking of the clot, that means the DVT is occurring or pulmonary embolism is occurring, something like that. That's what it says. And one more thing, this D-dimer, in a case of a DVT, I'm talking about sensitivity now. It is more than 80% in case of DVT, whereas in pulmonary embolism is pretty good. It is more than 95%. So this can be a good screening test. Okay, it has got a more sensitivity, because it has got a very high sensitivity. That's why D-dimer is used as a what it is used as screening test. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So one more thing, the size of the DVT, the size of thrombus is less. That's why the sensitivity is less. This one. And one more thing, normal D dimer is useful to rule out. Yeah, I told you. It is just a rule out technique. In case if D dimer is high, it doesn't say that the DVT or pulmonary embolism is there. It only says in case if this test is negative, rather, this test is negative. If it is negative, it suggests that no pulmonary embolism or DVT. It is reverse way of looking at it. So if you get a negative D dimer test, you can rule out these diseases rather than diagnosing it. That's why in a patient who has got a low risk, so we do D dimer, and if it comes negative, forget about it and start thinking something else. Okay, that's the logic of D dimer test there. It has got a negative predictive value rather than a diagnosing. It is a ruling out technique. D dimer. And it is a non-specific. Yeah, I got it. You should know that it has got a high sensitivity, but specificity is very low. Because it can get increased in many of the conditions like myocardial infarction, pneumonia, sepsis, cancer, post-operative state, and all this. Even in second and third semester pregnancy, D-dimer test can get increased. So D-dimer test is not a specific for DVT or pulmonary embolism. It only says that there is a thrombolysis inside the body happening. That could be not related to pulmonary embolism. Now, as I told, there is a RE microinfarction in pulmonary embolism. Troponins can also get raised. So, what happens is, and we already seen medicine residents diagnosing MI due to troponin levels, and later on the consultant comes and say it is a pulmonary embolism. These mistakes do happen. They do happen. Especially in the hospitals, it can happen. So that's why you should be careful. Yeah, and to differentiate, this is the one thing you should use electrocardiogram. So one of the commonest manifestations of pulmonary embolism is what?
Sinus
tachycardia. Yeah. But however, this is not. It is insensitive or not specific sinus tachycardia. Okay. And of course, this finding S1, Q3, T3, this finding is relatively specific but is less sensitive. Usually, a test which is more specific is less sensitive. Law of the nature it is. Most of the tests will go like that. A test which is more specific, usually it is less sensitive. It's not always, but usual. So similarly, this test which is ECG is this finding. This finding of ECG is good specific but less sensitive. Okay. And because there is strain and the microinfarction of the RV ischemia will manifest in the form of T wave inversions in V1 to V4. You'll get T wave inversions here. There is a sign of ischemia of RV. So this was the ECG. I'll show here also, there also here. S1 means, so what is the S wave? It is what is the first negative wave is in a QRS complex. This is a QRS complex. Okay. So I'll write here. You got a QRS complex. The first negative wave is what?
Q.
Yeah. Then whatever negative wave comes is S.
Yes.
Positive wave in QRS complex is R. Whatever. Depending upon the size, you get big R or small r. Okay. And if there are more than one R, second one will be called as R prime or R prime. Okay. You got this?
Yes,
That's the naming like that. So here, see, you can see this is a lead one. This is a lead one. In that, there is a negative second wave. See, there is a first, that means the first in the sense, it should be before the R wave. I forgot to tell you that. First means before the R wave. Whatever wave, negative wave that comes after the R wave, you cannot call it as Q wave. You should call it as S wave. Okay. You know that. So first negative in the sense it is before the R wave. It is if you get a negative wave like this before the R wave, then it is Q. So it as here you got it after the R wave, it is S wave. So S1. This is the lead one. This is the S1. Okay. Similarly, here you see this is the R wave, but you got a negative wave before that. For before that, so it is a Q wave.
Q.
So that is in the lead 3. This is a lead 3. So you are getting a Q wave here. This is Q. And T waves are inverted
Inversion.
here. Yeah. So due to this one na S1, Q3, T3 we call it. Okay. One of the classical findings of more specific finding of pulmonary embolism. So if you get such a this one, what you say finding in ECG, you can diagnose pulmonary embolism and go for imaging straight away. Rather. Okay. Now the all 12 lead diseases, same one, but you got a S wave here, you got where is lead 3, you got a Q wave here, and T wave is also negative. Q wave, Q wave, T wave negative. Okay, that's what it is. Now, now, what are the differential diagnoses for DVT as well as pulmonary embolism? So, a patient of a DVT, how does he present? The cough and swelling will be there. There is a tenderness in the cough. Okay. What
Moment
are the
sense.
findings in the D wave? This is a cough, like that. Huh? So there is a swelling here. Swelling, tenderness. What else you expect? Swelling, tenderness will be there. Skin discoloration can also occur. So, so even Baker's cyst rupture can also present with it can confuse you for deep vein thrombosis. You'll have to go for imaging to diagnose that. Okay, muscle strain, injury to the muscle, there can be swelling. Cellulitis basically. Cellulitis means the temperature will be more. Here, cellulitis means local temperature increased, whereas in DVT it is not increased. Okay. In fact, if you get a reduced temperature locally, then you should think of what? A limb which has become cold. What do you think? Huh?
What damage?
Arterial block due to embolus and all that. Huh? Ischemia. Huh? So if the temperature is more, think of cellulitis. Temperature is down, think of ischemia. Ischemia. And if there is a normal temperature, maybe you are dealing with DVT. Of course, other signs has to be there. Acute post-thrombotic and venous insufficiency can also. See, venous insufficiency can also cause edema. Okay, they can following DVT. Once a patient has what you say DVT has happened, sometimes the swelling persists, and it will keep on confusing for one more episode of DVT, although it may not be there. This happens is because of these veins. There are walls here inside. They get damaged. Due to that, the edema persists there. Hmm? Hmm? Okay. Pulmonary embolism. What are the differential diagnoses? Pneumonia. Yeah, because there is breathlessness, asthma, COPD, congestive cardiac failure, pericarditis, oh, pleurisy, costochondritis, all these things. Rib fracture, pneumothorax. Pneumothorax is very important. Acute coronary syndrome. That means NSTEMI and STEMI. Anxiety. Huh? These are all the differential diagnoses of pulmonary embolism. You should keep in mind. Now this is a CT scan showing a see what is this is what is this vessel? So the from the RV what happens is the this is a what is this the left pulmonary artery, this one is this is the left pulmonary artery, and this one is what right pulmonary artery, and you are seeing a clot here, filling defect. You can see a filling defect here. You can see this is a clot, pulmonary embolism. Hmm? Okay, there is a pulmonary embolism. So there will be algemy of the lung. Such a massive one. Huh? Whole lung will get algemic. Huh? Usually there is a focal wherever the whichever artery is blocked, depending upon the focal is a very massive. So you get algemy of the lung. Just have drink some water. Hmm. Okay. Methods of prophylaxis of against DVT. See, modern concept is any patient who is admitted in the hospital should not develop DVT. Huh? And should do all that is to prevent. Hmm? So
Prevention.
prevention. How to prevent? Just so compression stockings. They're very important actually. They are very important for prevention. Same thing. Intermittent compression. Uh, Mechanical devices. These are all. Some people use electrical devices like for DVT rather. So even PE because of that. Okay, you prevent DVT and you prevent PE as a it's a after consequences now. Hmm. Treatment of DVT now. Once a DVT has occurred, how do you treat? So you can see the treatment of DVT depends upon how severe it is. If it is just limited to the calf muscles, huh? This DVT is limited to the calf muscles. Probably you can give low mercury heparin something like that. But if it is extended right up to the iliac vein, femoral vein, up above, then you have to think of giving thrombolytics here also. Huh? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Huh? Here, I try to draw nicely. When I was a child, I used to draw. I stopped drawing. Huh? See, this is a leg. Not bad. Hmm. This is a vein. Okay. If it is only here thrombus, then you think of giving anti-heparin and all that, low mercury heparin. But if it is extended here also, even the iliac veins above, then you give thrombolytics. What are thrombolytics? Anybody? Why everybody is silent? Nobody is speaking. Huh? What are
Multiplex.
thrombolytics?
Multiplex.
Reticulates, streptokinase, urokinase, and all that. They are given. Thrombolytics are to be given for that. Okay. Once you treat, then you have to prevent. Now it is secondary prevention because patient has already undergone has DVT. Now it is secondary prevention, and secondary prevention is anticoagulation or placement of inferior vena cava. Meloni graduated this one. See here, there is something called there is a concept called. Just remember that provoked DVT, unprovoked DVT. Provoked means the patient is something like due to some fracture he became bedridden, or he is undergone some surgery and all that. Some drugs he has received like estrogen, and because of that they develop this complication. Then it becomes provoked. Unprovoked means you don't have any risk factors for developing DVT, but he developed it. Then you call it as a unprovoked. Hmm? Even one thing, long jet travels like more than if anybody has traveled to US from here, you will have to sit on the flight for 18 hours. Sitting ideally there. There it will be what? It can cause DVT. This becomes actually unprovoked. You know that. They may give a case like the patient who has come and stayed, moved from here to US and they developed a DVT and pulmonary embolism. Then how long you want to give prophylaxis for DVT? Because provoked and unprovoked, there's a difference in treating DVT. Hmm? There's a difference in treating DVT. Okay, if it is a unprovoked, it is 3 to 6 months. Unprovoked means prophylaxis. Secondary prevention I'm talking about. You have to give for more, almost indefinite. Unprovoked. Because you don't know the cause. You can't prevent that cause. Very simple. You know the cause. If you can prevent the cause, treat for 3 to 6 months. for secondary prevention, forget about it. If we don't know the cause, wait for, it's almost like indefinite secondary prevention. Secondary prevention is usually done with oral anticoagulants. Oral anticoagulants. It could be newer ones or older ones. Warfarin and all that. Resitrom, oral drugs are given for prevention of DVT. The high risk complications in patients of pulmonary embolism. The same one, elevation. This I think are discussed. I'll go to the next one. Now we'll go to the second question. Now I discussed about this one. A patient had a femur fracture for which internal fixation was done. 2 days later, the patient developed a sudden onset of shortness of breath with a low-grade fever. What is likely cause? So, what do you think?
Sir, fat embolism.
Fat embolism, pleural effusion. Why you say it is fat embolism?
It's a orthopedic case, sir. Fracture is there.
So, fat fracture means fat embolism.
Microembolism.
This one, the most important part here is 2 days, within 2 days. Following fracture, following internal fixation. In fact, sometimes this fat embolism can, in fact, it should be proper word is fat embolism syndrome. It is. Yeah. It is not just fat embolism. It is fat embolism syndrome. It is.
Yes.
Okay, because it is not just limited to lungs. It can complicate brain. It can go on liver, kidney, everywhere it can hit. This fats, fat bodies, fat material, they get into circulation. They go and cause a inflammatory reaction throughout the body. Systemic inflammatory inflammation it can cause and cause CNS dysfunction and produce drowsiness there. And respiratory tract, that is lungs, it can cause ERDS there. ARDS there. Then if it cause kidney, it can cause kidney problem like that. It involves multi-system. Multi-system it can cause. Okay. Syndrome, fat embolism syndrome it is. So this is a case which has happened within 2 days of internal fixation of the long bones. So it is, as you said, it is a fat embolism. As there is inflammation, there is a fever there. You can see that. Fat embolism, yeah, I written that fat embolism just presence of particles in the microcirculation. Fat embolism syndrome is systemic manifestation due to this fat embolism, fat emboli. So there it causes systemic inflammatory response, manifestations in lung, skin that can cause petechiae, neurological dysfunction. If you see the fundus, you can see retinal embolus there. There also you can see that. Etiology of fat embolism. The most common is orthopedic trauma or surgery. This is a common. Okay. The other is bone marrow transplantation. These are all rare, but all these are rare. This is a common. So osteomyelitis, pancreatitis, alcoholic fatty liver, and liposuction. Why do liposuction? For cosmetic it is basically, or for weight reduction. Liposuction. All these things are rare causes of fat embolism. This is a common cause. Many actresses probably have died because of this fat embolism. I don't know. I never know. You have seen many of few Telugu actresses, they died following fat embolism. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, this is a criteria. Just I'll go through. This is not very. You should just know diagnosis of fat embolism. There are two, three are there. Just remember these three are major, minor. The major respiratory distress has to be there. Cerebral signs has to be there. Petechial hemorrhage, CNS, lung, anywhere. Of the three, two should be there. And of them, how many? Four. So these they are there. Then it is you can diagnose it as fat embolism syndrome. Okay, two major criteria and all. I'll not go through this. These there are many more criteria are there. I'll just skip them. Now we'll go to the next. Just know that fat embolism is a disease or it is an inflammatory disease following fat embolus in the microcirculation, leading to all dysfunctions of the many organs, more so the lung and brain, and lung, brain, skin, retina. These are the places which it hit hard. Now, a 20-year-old boy admitted to the casualty with the history of a breathlessness following leg massage by his mother. He had a history of hairline fracture now. Hairline fracture uh, on the below cast for 4 weeks, which was removed recently. So he had a hairline fracture. This boy, cast was removed, and now suddenly he comes with the diagnosis what breathlessness. What do you think that they're asking you? Somebody must have come. Okay, somebody is trying to join. I'll admit him. Okay. So the patient see is very classical. See one more thing now. Patient if he has got a DVT now,
The
you
DVT.
yeah DVT deep vein thrombosis, deep vein thrombosis. You should not uh, try to produce tenderness. You should not check for tenderness. Be careful. Huh? That means you press that coffin and you may in fact complicate with the pulmonary embolism for the baby, for the patient. So avoid that test. What Hammond's and whatever the test is there, surgeons will tell you all that and avoid that test. That test is can cause complication. Okay. This mother na, for this patient, she has done a massage. Same thing. So, and this patient developed complication of pulmonary embolism. Okay. I will not take this as a pneumonia because there's no fever, all the stuff. Fat embolism, as I said, not there. There's nothing for air embolism. Air embolism, where you get air embolism, I'll discuss about air embolism now. I'll go through that briefly. Air embolism can be either venous or arterial. Venous or arterial. Most commonly, we see venous arterial, venous only, and they are more commonly when the central lines are put inside. Central lines, if they're open outside, and during inspiration there will be negative pressure. It can suck air and cause air embolism. Okay. Arterial embolism happens usually during surgery. They open the vessels and all that now. They'll cut open vessel. They'll be doing anastomosis and all that. There can air can enter into the arterial system. Arterial embolism can happen. Okay. Arterial embolism can happen. So air embolism, that is about it. Now physiological effects of venous air embolism. What are it can cause? Similar to that, in the physiological effects of venous air embolism are similar to pulmonary embolism. Of any etiology evidence as evidence by. See, you can see what all you can see in venous air embolism is similar to pulmonary embolism. Why? Because of venous vein embolism, where it will go? It will go from the venous to the right atrium, from there to right ventricle, from there it goes to the pulmonary circulation, and cause it go and plug there, and cause pulmonary embolism only again. So the manifestations are similar. So there is right atrial pressure increase, weak view mismatch, that is dead space. I was discussing all that. Then intrapulmonary shunting. What is intrapulmonary shunting? It means there is a ventilation, but there is no perfusion. Absolute, no perfusion. So the blood will get shunted through other channels. That's what. So increased alveolar dead space. Yeah, same thing. It is all similar to pulmonary embolism. So venous vein embolism is similar to pulmonary embolism. Pulmonary embolism clinically. Now left ventricle air. This we cardiologists see actually. Sometimes what happens is I'll tell you the most common cause for this one. What I'm drawing? Heart.
Yes.
This is a mitral stenosis now. Mitral stenosis. So in mitral stenosis, what we do is, this is the inferior vena cava. I'll put a balloon here. This balloon will, I'll pierce through intra-atrial septum and bring that balloon here, in between here. Mitral stenosis. I have to break open this. It is called as PTMC, percutaneous transmitral commissurotomy. So this balloon, I'll try to put it in and expand here. This balloon. Okay. I'll expand this balloon. Sometimes this will be containing bit of air inside this balloon. Okay.
Yes, sir.
What happens is this balloon can rupture, manufacturing defect or multiple reuses and all that, it can rupture. So when this ruptures, this air goes into the ventricle here. Okay, there can be air here. In the left ventricle, it can go produce a air. This left ventricle air, they suddenly go into the aorta. Huh? In the aorta, it goes to the most commonly to the right coronary artery and cause right RV dysfunction. Left ventricle area, you should know this. And also it can cause a ventricle filling. See, coronary artery blocks basically right. It can cause heart failure and shock, and all these complications can occur. And if the amount of air injected is more, the patient may die also. This is one of the complications of rupture of PTMC balloon, percutaneous transmitter commissurotomy balloon. If the ruptures, it can cause. This is a complication. Reusing the old material. What to do in India? These balloons are very expensive and charges are very less. So that's why this PTMC is a disease of the poor man. Nah? Huh? That's why this complication may occur, but however, it is very rare. You should know that. A 40 and okay, a 40-year-old female patient with the nephrotic syndrome. Now, see, I'll come here. A 40-year-old female with the nephrotic syndrome presents to the ER, means emergency room, with the complaints of acute onset of breathlessness after prolonged air travel for 16 hours. This is unprovoked. Still, this is unprovoked, but this is provoked. This part is provoked. This part is unprovoked. Still, it is a provoked only. Provoked pulmonary embolism. You are getting me?
Yes,
Hello.
sir.
Nephrotic syndrome is a major cause of pulmonary embolism. So this case is a provoked pulmonary embolism now. 40-year-old female patient with nephrotic syndrome presents to the ER with the complaints of acute onset of breathlessness after prolonged air travel of 16 hours. On clinical examination, the pulse rate is very high, 120. BP is okay. That means it is a normal pressure.
Normal
Okay.
time.
Normal tension, pulmonary embolism. Yeah, normal tension, but saturation is down. There is hypoxia. Huh? Huh?
Submassive, sir.
Huh?
Submassive.
Yeah, something like submassive. Actually, submassive, you cannot, it is not a clinical diagnosis. Now you are making a clinical diagnosis. That is a pathological diagnosis. But however, it matches in treatment. You can, okay. Clinically, we call mild, moderate, severe, or normal tension with the, what you say, RVD, right ventricular dysfunction, normal tension with the normal right ventricle, normal tension, right ventricular dysfunction with hypotension. That's how we can clinically classify. I'll show that. Of course, that matches to submassive. Correct. Clinical classification is different depending on what you see is pressure and echo. You do RV checking. If I'm doing echocardiography, I can look for right ventricular function, whether dilatation are there or not. So this patient is actually with the normal blood pressure, there's a hypoxia and right ventricle dilatation is there. And interventricular septum is deviated to the left side. That means the right ventricle, this is a septum here. So this is a right ventricle. This is a left ventricle. Due to high pressure here, this will be deviated to the left ventricle. That's what it says. So there is a our right ventricular dysfunction with RVD but normal tension. Septum deviation to the left. What is the next step in the management? What you want to do? You want to give plasminogen activator, unfractionated heparin, thrombectomy, or IVC filter? The first treatment. Answer that. What is treatment you want to do? See,
Sir.
severe cases, na definitely this is the thrombolytic. Intravenous plasminogen activator means thrombolytic drugs only, man. Hey, thrombolytic drugs, which are this? Altiplase and all those things, they will activate this only. Okay. These are
Yes, sir.
thrombolytics they're talking about. Unfractionated heparin is anticoagulant. Thrombectomy, is a mechanical removing it. IVC filter is basically to what? It is secondary prevention. Hmm?
Prevention.
Yeah, for secondary, it is not for when a patient is serious, we don't put IVC filter. When patient got stabilized, we start thinking. It's further episodes to prevent the further episodes. We put IVC filters. Hmm? Okay, so this one is out. Okay, you have to make a decision between the. This is a very serious case, definitely thrombectomy. So I don't think this. The choice is between these two actually. You want to go for this or this? I will go for actually. There is a
First,
nephrotic syndrome. Yeah, see, you can see nephrotic syndrome. So if there is a comorbid condition is there, this patient has got a comorbid condition. Huh? This comorbid condition means giving a what? Any drug is a bit risky only. More so with this intravenous thromboplasminogen activators. Thrombolytic drugs, they are more risky. So going by that patient is bit stable, is stable, it is submassive, we go for this. However, you had a patient, imagine, this one is not there. Hmm? This one is not there. You are not afraid now. Just this could be there or then may not be there. Then I would have gone for this. You got it?
yes,
Same
sir.
patient without this. It is bit individualistic. It's not very clear cut. But however, if there are very no comorbid conditions, then go for intravenous plasminogen activator, thrombolytics, and all that thing. If they are there, then go for this in a patient who is having submassive or intermediate type of pulmonary embolism. Okay, I'll come to, yeah. This is the picture of IVC filter. Just like they'll put a filter so that the deep vein thrombus, if they come here, they should get stuck here. They should not go up into the right into the heart and go to prevent going into the heart and further into pulmonary circulation. These are filters. Hmm? So the management of pulmonary embolism, risk stratified. If it is a normal tension with the normal RV, right ventricle is normal. So just think of secondary prevention. Just give them anticoagulants. It is a small what? If at all, if it is a small pulmonary embolism. If it is a recurrent chance, then think of IVC filter. Okay, for secondary prevention. Okay, depends upon the case. This one is okay. Now it is our case is here actually. The case which is mentioned here. Normal tension with RV hypokinesis. RV is down. Individualized therapy looking by the comorbid conditions. If the comorbid conditions are there, go towards this. Comorbid condition not there, go towards this. That's what it is. Okay. If the BP is down, then go for anticoagulation or embolectomy. Okay, depending on severity. So, which one of the following conditions is most likely to occur in a patient with the following hemodynamic data? Pressure of RA is 12, RV is 50 by 12, PA is 50 by 15, pulmonary bed pressure is 8, aorta is 80. So, what do you think in this case? They're asking you actually. Now we'll analyze this. The RA pressure of 12. What do you think it is more or less?
Normal, less than
RA
18.
12. RA man, I'm not running LA. Right atrium, right ventricle. What is normal JVP? It go into the ear. RA pressure high means. RA pressure means what, man? You are
Sir, 2
here. You got see. Where is it? Cardiac index here. Where I put it here. Right. Uh, where is capillary? It is there. Not there. Central venous pressure. RO, right atrial pressure. It is just 2 to 6. Hmm? RA pressure. JVP pressure only it is almost like.
yes, sir.
RA, okay, it is just 2. So it is RA pressure is more. Then RV pressure is 50 by 12. That is also more. In fact, where is right ventricle here? Right ventricle pulmonary artery pressure. It is similar to that actually. Right ventricle pressure you see here 20 by 5. Very less. Okay. How much is this patient's? It is 15 by 12. So RV pressure also is more. So this case, so RA pressure is more, RV pressure is more. Even this is also more. I'll show that. Pulmonary artery pressure is this here, 20 to 30, 8 by 12. Mean is 25. So here we got 50 in this case. So this is also more. Huh? So all right systems, pulmonary artery, right ventricle, right atrium, both all three are increased here. So pulmonary artery wedge pressure. What is this? PCWP. What I told, it is
Left atrium.
it is usually less than 12, 8 to 12. It is more than 18 means you call it as increased. But in this case, anyway, it is 8. That means it is not increased. Okay. Pulmonary artery blood pressure is normal. Aorta 80 by 60 means is less. Aorta means what? Or blood pressure only. It is less.
Yes,
There is
sir.
hypotension. Systemic hypotension is there. Now cardiac index. What is cardiac index?
For
What is cardiac
square,
index? Uh,
sir, cardiac output per square body surface area.
yeah, very good, very good, very good. Cardiac output, that is stroke volume, that is stroke volume into 1 minute. For 1 minute, that is heart rate basically. Stroke volume, stroke volume into heart rate. For 1 meter body square, that is 1.4. What is normal? It is around 2.5. Where is this? Um, yeah, cardiac index here it is. What is it? Around 2.5 cr. That is also reduced. So cardiac index reduced. Systemic vascular resistance. Hmm? Systemic vascular resistance I have put here. These slides are there. So it is 800 to 1200. That means it is more in this case. So systemic vascular resistance has increased. Huh? PVR is also, that is pulmonary vascular resistance. It is. How much is pulmonary vascular resistance? This is here C. That is how much? 35 to 250. In this case, it is 500. Huh? Huh? 500. That means these two are increased. So increased, increased, reduced, reduced. What is this? RV is also increased. PR is increased. Pulmonary increased. Huh? These things have happened here. So that means in this case, what has happened is right side the pressures are increased, left side pressures are decreased. There is a augmentation of vascular resistance. That's all has happened. Okay, the picture is like that. Where you expect this? So if the PCWP is normal, I will not blame left atrium. I'll go into the lung straight. From the lung, I will think whatever is possible. Okay. Now, as PCWP is normal, acute MI with LVF cardiogenic shock, no. Okay.
No, sir. Yes, sir.
His PCWP would have been increased to
Increased.
make this diagnosis. Okay. This is unlikely. Hypovolemic shock with the gastroenteritis. There is no reason for RV pressure to go up in this. Okay.
Yes.
Yes or not there. Early septic shock, similar. RV pressure will not go up there also. Decreased. Unlikely. RV pressure can be only explained with massive pulmonary embolism. Choice is this is the correct answer. Post-operative patient with the signs of deep vein thrombosis develops pulmonary embolism with dyspnea. The next step, I think it is very straightforward. This is the better answer compared to
Yes,
this.
sir.
Why unfractionated heparin versus low molecular heparin is the equal efficacy. Efficacy wise, these two are equal. Only thing is low molecular heparin have got reduced bleeding risk. Low molecular heparin have got a reduced bleeding risk compared to unfractionated heparin. So a patient who has undergone surgery, there will be a trauma. If you give a drug which has got a higher chance of bleeding, you should avoid. So when the choice is between these two, in a patient, especially with post-operative state, you go for this. Anyway, routinely we go for this only. More so in this case, it is because there is a wound there due to surgery. It can bleed. So you go for this. Okay, in this case, that is the logic. This is a pretty old question. They may not ask you. Now BP scans for pulmonary embolism is not being done. I'll drink water now. All of the following are true regarding VP scan, that is ventilation perfusion scan. They used to do this initially for diagnosing a pulmonary embolism. Now, because of CT scan with HRCTs especially, or CT scan with the contrast, we can forgo this VP scan. Nobody really do it actually. So, what do you expect? See, ventilation means they'll put some air-like thing inside the lung, which emits gamma radiation, some radiation, which they'll photograph. They'll push some drug into in the circulation, which also will produce some radiation, and take an image of it. That's it. Now, got it. Now, two or more segmental perfusion defect. That means the blood is not flowing in two or three. Some segments, the blood is not flowing, but ventilation is normal. So, high probability of pulmonary embolism. It appears sensible. Huh? They are asking except here, see. So, you suspect VTE if there is a perfusion defect with the normal ventilation. Got it? Hmm? There is a perfusion, blood is not going, but the ventilation is okay. That is expected in PTE. So, this is not except, it is except question. So, this is not the answer. Now, VP scan is contraindicated in pregnancy. Hmm? This is something, I'll come to that later. An abnormal ventilation perfusion is usually due to conditions other than PTA. Yeah, there are other common conditions like COPD, chronic bronchitis, tuberculosis, and all those stuff. They can also cause abnormal ventilation perfusion defects. Yeah, that's true. Other than PT is more common. PT is a less common disease compared to this. So, if you got this abnormal ventilation perfusion scans, don't diagnose PTE for that because there are other better, more common diseases are there. That's what they're telling you. This is also correct. Normal scan rules out clinically significant pulmonary embolism. Yeah, if there is a pulmonary thromboembolism, there has to be perfusion defect. Blood should not flow. If there is no perfusion defect, then pulmonary thromboembolism is not there. This also is correct. So this also is a correct answer. This is also correct answer. This is also correct answer. Another problem forms here. So this appears in a place where you don't have any ways of diagnosing, then go for the scan. Although there is a little risk of radiation. Okay, even in pregnancy, radiation risk is there little. Still, you go for it. So it is not fully absolutely contraindicated. So this is the answer in this. Huh? You're getting me?
Yes, sir.
Which of the following is the best test for pulmonary embolism? Now they are asking best test. What do you want to go for?
CT scan, sir.
What?
CT scan.
Why? Why not D dimer?
Sir, it is a screening test. It's not
Yes,
scientific.
it is only indicated in a patient who got a low risk, low likely of the pulmonary embolism. So that itself is not a best test. Okay. Huh? This is the correct answer. Okay. As you said, that is the correct answer. Characteristic ECG findings in pulmonary embolism now. Which is the answer for this?
S1
Characteristic?
Q3
Huh?
S1 Q3 T3, sir.
Yeah. This is, as I said, this is common, but not specific. Okay. TB innovation. This is also not specific, but this is specific. But less sensitive. Okay. So this is specific, less sensitive. This one. This is the correct answer. A patient undergoing surgery develops a hypotension now. He was undergoing surgery. During that, he develops a hypotension. The monitor shows that the end tidal carbon dioxide has decreased abruptly by 15 mmHg. What is the probable diagnosis? These are all the questions which are appeared. These are not making. It may appear a bit difficult. Anyway, try to answer that.
Sir, massive pulmonary embolism.
Massive pulmonary embolism. Massive pulmonary embolism. So why there should carbon dioxide should come down? What sort of respiratory failure do you expect? A patient who develops a pulmonary embolism will start hyperventilating. Huh?
Type 2, sir.
Yeah. Let us come to know. It is end tidal. That means you are actually checking the carbon dioxide which the patient is expiring out. Huh? That machine, whatever carbon dioxide is coming out, that you are checking there. Huh? So a patient who hyperventilates, whatever carbon dioxide in the body will be coming out. So this end tidal carbon dioxide will not reduced in this patient. Hmm? They will be coming out. This is not the one. Hmm? So hypothermia, no. That does not reduce, don't reduce that much. Pulmonary embolism, no. Massive fluid deficit, no. The first thing you should go for this. Myocardial depression due to anesthetic drugs. The heart will start pumping less. There is a decrease in cardiac output, and that is the most common cause. These are all anesthetic drugs. They can cause myocardial depression. So the anesthetist, they'll be looking at the carbon dioxide patient is expiring out, exhaling out. If it starts falling down, they'll check the patient. The levels of carbon dioxide that is released. What is end tidal carbon dioxide means? It is CO2. That's also called. It means that level of carbon dioxide that is released at the end of an exhaled breath. That is what it is. This reflects the adequacy with which CO2 is carried in the blood back to lungs and exhaled. That's what. How beautifully the carbon dioxide is going out of the body. That's what it checks. Okay. Indication of cardiac output and pulmonary blood flow. Yeah. Anyway, this patient has developed this one reduced now. That's what it is. That is the first track. Huh? Normal 35 to 45 mmHg. Normal this one is this one. This one. Okay. Huh?
Yes, sir.
Actually, sometimes I do feel that this is the correct answer. Pulmonary blood flow means it is reduced means whether CO2 massive pulmonary embolism. Pulmonary embolism. Anyway, he has put it just pulmonary embolism. We'll go for this one. This choice is there. Huh? So if it is a massive pulmonary embolism, like a pulmonary blood flow going down, and that's how carbon dioxide has come, that also can be thought. But if this choice is there, you should go for that because that anyway will reduce everything. Hmm? Hmm? Now, all are seen in a massive pulmonary embolism except
Pulmonary plethoric.
yeah, pulmonary plethora is the
Only,
correct answer.
only
Yeah,
game.
in Matthew pulmonary embolism, intraventricular septum will shifted to the left ventricle. There is a systemic hypotension. JP will get reduced, increased, elevated. So in fact, they will get the oligemia. You get oligemia. Rather than reverse of plethora. So this is the correct answer. Okay. Any doubts?
No, sir.
You got a class at 8 o'clock. Get ready now.
Okay, sir.
One more class is there at 8 o'clock. Get ready.
Okay, sir.
Okay.